all CEOs, me included, we don't actually know what we're doing.
They're all sharks, so all you got to do, though, is know shark behavior.
I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We can capture all of the wallet share.
First place you start is with the product.
That's just the first note.
This is the Capital Stack. Hey everybody, this is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where I talk to founders, operators, and investors about all things value creation in startups. Today I am speaking with Liz Harrow, who is a partner at Shakti Ventures, which is a early stage venture capital firm, both in San Francisco and in New York, having two offices. Liz, how you doing?
Great, David. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm drinking a Diet Coke. It's kind of like the equivalent of smoking a cigarette today.
It's one of those days.
Yeah. Do you drink Diet Coke?
I don't. Yeah. I'm
you judging me?
I'm not judging you. I'm a big club soda person. So my soda stream was my best COVID purchase.
Yeah. No, the soda stream is good. I feel like it's like a lot of work because then you have to like put the thing in the fridge and like you have to be very tactical with it.
It's definitely a lot of work and you have to, constantly order the cartridges on Amazon, but it's worth it. And I think it's good for the environment. So I feel like I'm doing good too.
Yeah, I'm going broke buying Topo Chico. Like just the cases of it. I'm responsible for the Topo Chico shortage that happened during COVID.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah, no, that was. I was
good marketing.
I was feeling rich, like because everyone was feeling rich during COVID, and I would just like buy cases of it, and then I was just like, oh my god, this is getting out of hand. I mean, like I couldn't even use like pull the trash out. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on, and I'd love to learn a little bit about the origin name first of Shakti.
Yeah, of course. So the word Shakti, it's actually a Sanskrit word, and it means primordial energy or the energy that's there at the beginning at birth. And the reason that it's the name of our fund is because as very early stage investors, we are there from the beginning with founders. And so you could say that we're kind of the Shakti at the beginning of a founder's journey, helping to empower them. So that's the origin of the word.
Nice. And you've been a partner there for how long?
Been a partner at Shakti for over a year. The fund itself is relatively new. It was started in December 2020 by my partner, Keval Desai.
Yeah. And so, and prior to that, there was another fund before. You're raising fund 2 now, correct?
We're raising fund 2. That's correct. Fund 1 is the fund that's been around since December 2020. So a COVID fund. That was the first one. And my business partner, Keval, was a partner at Interwest for about a decade prior to joining Shakti.
Yeah. Keval has a very long, incredibly deep history within Silicon Valley. I did some work with him. So how did you meet? And because you had a Wall Street background, it looked like, prior to becoming a VC. So how did that kind of come into fruition, you jumping that chasm?
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, David, my background is at Wall Street. I spent 10 years at Morgan Stanley. Most recently there, I spent about 4 years on the venture side in their in-house venture capital group and startup accelerator. And Morgan Stanley has a really unique group that specifically invests in female and multicultural founders called the Multicultural Innovation Lab. And so spent time there, invested in about 60 companies over that time period. Great experience dipping my toe into early stage venture. Prior to that, I started my career in equity research. So complete opposite end of the spectrum, looking at large public companies, which is not as fun as the early stage side and really getting to know founders. And was introduced to Keval through a colleague and mentor at Morgan Stanley, and it really was a great fit. We have complementary backgrounds. His background is the tech side. Silicon Valley operator side. My background is on Wall Street. So we really shared a passion for working with founders and thinking of founders and LPs as our clients. So it was actually a really good synergy.
I really like that, and you really highlight that a lot in your website, because generally speaking, unless your name is Founders Fund, your People's Ventures name is so-and-so Venture, so-and-so Capital. Like you're a big stakeholder that people don't talk about is their limited partner base. And first and foremost, you need to, give a return, right? I would say or else this is nothing. This is charity, right? And so how do you think about engaging them as customers, right? And making sure that they're always right and that they're always happy with you. And how do you position yourself within the venture landscape for that?
Yeah, well, we definitely don't want to make sure that they think they're always right. That's we're not adding any value by doing that. But you're right. And yeah, to the point of the name, there's a reason our name, it's not Cable or Liz Capital. We're trying to build a firm for generations, and it's not just going to be us. But we really put our founders first and foremost. And I think, there's not a ton out there on us on the internet, and that's intentional. We don't like to talk about ourselves. And we firmly believe that if we're doing a good job and we're doing right by our founders, they will be our mouthpiece. And that so far has worked out. And we find our best recommendations for companies and deal flow comes from founders who, when a friend of theirs, colleague is raising money, they say, well, you should have Shakti on your cap table because they've been great to work with. So we make it our number one priority to support founders in whatever their challenges at the moment, whether it's help with hiring, help with business development, help with fundraising, you name it, we try to be as valuable as we can be, being a very small team and being an emerging fund. Yeah.
And, it's always challenging when a founder says, what's the value add creation? Because it's not a Chinese menu. I think first and foremost, having a really great relationship, being able to, have the emotional intelligence to, build trust, is number one. And then number two is all the different kind of items you can help with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's, people commonly think you have to be on a board in order to add real value to companies. But in our experience, we found that's absolutely not true. And there's several companies that we're not on the board of, but founders come to us first because they value our opinion. And so that's the role that we like to play. And then, we know the limitations of being a small team, which is why we really try to take the community approach. And we have this amazing network of current and former C-suite individuals that we call the Titan Network, where people can help dig in. They're both LPs in our fund as well as mentors, and they help our companies with their relevant expertise. And these are executives from Fortune 500 companies like Google and Amazon and YouTube, Oracle, Ralph Lauren, you name it. And so we really have diverse expertise to be able to support our founders. And it's amazing to see how much our Titans really give their time and love to mentor the next generation. And so I think, if you've spoken to any of our founders, they would tell you that the Titan Network is one of the greatest value adds that we have.
I love that you put a title and a wrapper around that. I mean, is there, when you think about, interject or exposing a limited partner to a founder, is there a process for that? Is there an onboarding, or is it just kind of, you make the introduction, you let the magic happen?
Yeah. It's a little bit of both, David. And I think, there has to be a level of curation that comes with the process because, then it's not necessarily fair to either party. So we obviously, when we think that there could be a mutual fit, we kind of make sure to broker the connection. And then if the founder and the Titan hit it off and continue the relationship, that's amazing. There's no obligation that a Titan has to do that. There's no amount of time that they need to spend. In our experience, the relationships have been curated extremely well. And the founder as well as the Titan find a lot of value in the relationship.
Got it. And then so when you're out and you're kind of recruiting for Titan Network, what if so-and-so is, ex-real estate guy, right? And might not have operational experience, is there like an expectation that they're going to be helping companies? Because I feel like everyone wants to feel valued, right? And, like, how do you kind of, manage expectations about, involvement with the portfolio?
Yeah. There's no expectation that a Titan, has to spend a certain amount of time. It's really if there's overlap in terms of their area of expertise. And, whether regardless of the industry, if you're a Titan of industry, you're the top, there's absolutely skills that you can transfer to an up and coming founder. And, there's incredible leadership skills. It doesn't matter what your background is. And the Titan model itself was modeled after Bill Campbell, who was an incredible coach. He was, a college football coach turned coach of legendary CEOs at the top companies, including Google. And this is someone who didn't necessarily have a background in all of the industries in which he was coaching certain CEOs, but there are certain managerial skills that are transferable across industries. And so I think that is the value that our Titan network brings. It's really to be that Olympic coach. I mean, from our perspective, we think about our founders are trying to win the gold medal in whatever their industry is, whatever they're building. And if you're going for the gold medal, you're not going to, your local corner gym. You're going to get an Olympic coach. And so that's what we're doing for our founders. Our Titans are the equivalent of those Olympic coaches for their journeys.
I love that. You're referencing The $1 Trillion Coach, which is a phenomenal book. What I liked most about the story of Bill Campbell was, like, as you said, he was, I think a collegiate, coach, and like for a team that wasn't even that good. And I don't think they ended up being that good anyway, but like he had what he had, right? But he was able to gain so much notoriety and influence just by the soft skills, right, that he had with people. And didn't he become like CEO of like Quicken or something, or Intuit, like for a little bit? Like, it was unbelievable.
He had leadership positions at several large companies, and to your point, that wasn't necessarily his background, being a football coach, but he had such an incredible ability to build teams, which is very hard to replicate. And I think we've tried to find similar folks in our network to kind of play that role. And we've recently, one of our amazing Titans is a man named Dean Gilbert, who's been an executive in the media space for several decades. And he's played that role for several other CEOs to be their CEO coach, help them build teams, help them build boards. And so we try to replicate that across for our companies.
What do you think that it takes to be a $1 trillion coach? Like, and to have those skills. Anybody can give advice to a founder. Like, they get it from everybody, right? But what makes a $1 trillion coach different from every other person that thinks that they know something, that wants to impart knowledge?
Yeah. And I don't want to, put down, because there's so many amazing coaches out there, but it's really, really hard to be the top $1 trillion coach. And I think it's just having been in that seat before. There's only a finite number of people who have been CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. So I think it's people who you have to have been in that seat and have the leadership experience, the board experience, the operational experience to truly advise a different generation of founder on what it takes. And this is something that Dean talked about in our conversation with him, which is that in thinking about building your board, it's not necessarily the venture person who should be the number one. It's someone who actually has been there, done that in terms of having the operational experience. So I think first and foremost, it really helps to be, have had that experience, whether it's you've been the head leader of a Fortune 500 company or you've been the chief leader of a sports team. There are certain skills that come from, being a leader that are transferable across industries. And so I think if you look at our $1 trillion coaches, all of them have that in common. And I think also there needs to be a great need and interest in helping out another founder. And so I think if you look at our Titans, they've all been successful in their own right, but they have this desire to give back. And so I think for them, they're all on boards and they're helping and they're busy. But for them, what's exciting is to be able to give back and make a change at the very early stage of someone's career.
So, agreed. I feel like board meetings, founders, sometimes they come to them and they want to like talk about like big product decisions and or, go to market decisions. And, some of the boards I belong to, we're just a bunch of financiers on the board. I'm like, you shouldn't be having these conversations or making these decisions with us, right? I'm happy to introduce you to X amount and I can sit in, but the stakes are too high for guys like me to weigh input on product decision, right? So tell me a little bit about the overall investment thesis of Shakti, despite just being early in the journey. Like, what are you guys interested in, and how did you come to that?
Yeah, so our general thesis is that we're looking for companies that are reimagining the world's largest habits with new tech infrastructure. And so what that means is, first and foremost, we're looking at the largest markets out there. And any very large market out there is being reimagined every decade or so. So when you think about, for example, some of the markets that we're very interested in are mobility. So getting from point A to point B. This is something that has been done forever, but the means in which people are commuting or driving are constantly changing. And so mobility is one of the themes that's super interesting to us. Another one is commerce. People have been shopping forever, and that's never going to change. But the means in which people are shopping, from in-person to online, the infrastructure behind it, is constantly changing. So that's a habit that's being reimagined all the time. In terms of video and media, how people are communicating, us right now, whether it's a podcast or a video, is the reimagination of a longstanding habit. And so when we think about the world, we think about, where are people spending most of their time, and what are the companies out there that are lowering different frictions within those industries in order to reimagine them. So that's how we think about the world, and all of the companies in our portfolio play into that, and they're all reimagining habits in certain forms.
And so when I say, you're looking at these big markets, you're in the biggest tech hubs. I mean, New York is blowing up right now as far as deal count, especially in the early stage. San Francisco, very competitive. How, when I say company picking, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so when we think about company picking, I think first and foremost, we think about the market size. We're looking for companies that have the potential to IPO. And so you have to fish in the largest markets there. And so that's first and foremost what we look at. And then we think about the founder. As I mentioned, we have amazing deal flow from our own community, whether it's our professional, personal networks, our founders, our LPs, et cetera. We're looking for a founder who's going to be the next Melanie Perkins of Canva or Julie Wainwright of The Real, people who really have what it takes. And that comes from building relationships over time. And then one of the things that we look at after that is why now? There could be, incredible technologies that are just frankly ahead of their time. There were attempts to create cell phones a long, long time before they actually existed. But because we didn't have the wide area network, you couldn't have those companies exist. And then once we had that, you saw, the iPhone, Android, whatever, become very popular. And so there has to be a component of why now. And then the last component is, can this company go the distance, 10x or more, go public? Because we are looking for those companies. And it's challenging at the early stage. But when we think about the two biggest risks that we're taking as early stage investors, number one is the market risk, and number two is the founder risk. I think, if we're investing in markets that we know and we understand, that's mitigated a little bit, but the founder risk is really challenging. And so that's where the quality of the network, the quality of the pipeline and the founders is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. And how do you judge a good founder?
It's the $1 million question, David. I mean, we're not always right. I think that's why, venture is a really hard business. I think it comes from getting to know people over a long period of time. Several of the founders in our portfolio you'll see are our former colleagues, people that we've really built relationships with. Not all of them, of course, but we spend a lot of time with founders understanding their experience, why they're the right people for the opportunity. But, as you're not always right. But we try.
That's for sure. I feel like good founders is kind of a lagging indicator because good founders generally have had success, right? Or before you're just kind of guessing that they're good founders because, good meaning that you've actually surpassed something, or else it's just kind of an opinion, right? Or like a bias that you have because they have qualities that you like. But there's a gazillion ways to make money in this business.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one quality or indicator of what makes a good founder. And I think what's really interesting about our portfolio, David, is that there's founders from all walks of life. There's founders who it's their second, third company. There's founders who are fresh out of college. It's their first company. There's founders who are from all over the world, all different educational backgrounds. So there's not really, one main thing to point to. I think one thing that we've found in terms of consistency across founders is that you have to be a really good storyteller. Especially in this environment when it's more and more challenging to get capital, you have to be the number one storyteller for your company, whether that's to get capital in the door, to hire the initial team, to convince people to buy your product or service. You can't, we rarely see incredible founders who aren't also really good storytellers.
What's the makings of a good story or a good storyteller?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind that I think every element of a strong story should have. I think there needs to be an element of why you as a founder and why now. So why are you the right person to go after this opportunity? What makes you or your team uniquely capable of going after this problem that you're presenting? Because that's really important. You're getting people, especially at an early stage, they're investing in you. And I think why now goes back to what I mentioned earlier of there needs to be a reason why now is the time to get on board with this technology. Why is the market ready for it? Why is it ripe for disruption? Why is this going to succeed in building something that other people have not been able to do before? So there needs to be a sense of what is the urgency? Because I think if you don't have that, then people are likely to kind of sit back and say, well, I can wait for the next round or, whatever the excuse is. But why you and why now are extremely important.
I love that because if we're looking at good software solves problems, and you have to articulate a story on, if this problem was that big, why hasn't it been previously solved? And usually you need to, connect that with a market dynamic or a technology improvement, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you have to really answer that question effectively. There's a lot of markets out there where people have been trying to do something, but it hasn't necessarily been working out. And so you need to be able to answer the question of why is your technology going to lower the friction and make it easier for people to do something that they haven't been able to do before.
Where's the edge, right? Yeah, where's the edge? Where's the distribution channel? There's got to be some kind of momentum behind it.
Exactly. Yes. And I think if you look at a company like The RealReal, people have been consigning since the beginning of time. But until The RealReal came in and they really lowered the friction in terms of what it takes to be able to buy and sell your stuff online, it was really challenging. And so that's a company that had a clear thesis for how it was going to do that.
Well, correct. And it it's probably a lot deeper than that, because early stage investors were like, well, eBay, why don't people just do this on eBay? Right. Or like, why can't eBay do this? And there had to have been like something deeper, right? Like within the market. I don't know the story of that story, but I'm sure there was some, a lot of like different intricacies that the founder had to go through, or a distribution channel that she had. So
there were
great story.
A lot of doubt at first.
Give me an example of like a great story that catapulted one of your early stage companies into a success today, and where the story like really resonated and it actually came true.
Yeah, so I think one that comes to mind is a company in our portfolio called Gatik. And I mention it because I mentioned, David, that one of the areas of focus for us is mobility. And I think Gatik plays into so many themes that are being reimagined. And so I think it's a good one to highlight. And so Gatik is a company that's creating autonomous vehicles for middle mile delivery. And they're creating the software for them. So effectively what that means is you have the long distance delivery and you have the last mile, but there's that middle mile where it's basically constant deliveries from warehouses that are outside of cities to warehouses that are closer to the consumer. And you mentioned you're a big Topo Chico fan. So you're creating all of this demand for products that you're going to constantly need to go pick up at whatever the local store is. Well, those products need to be constantly replenished. And so that's one massive habit in terms of people constantly, they're shopping online, they're going to get their groceries online. That's driven a reason to have this company. And so Gatik's biggest customers are companies like Walmart, Loblaws, Sam Club, and they're effectively running these repeating routes through the night, completely autonomous vehicles to help replenish warehouses. And it's really incredible to see how it works and the way that it solves for so many problems in the industry right now, whether it's the need for greater replenishment, the driver shortage, et cetera. And so that's a company that's reimagining how we're getting goods from point A to point B, completely driven by a change in the way that our society operates and the way that we consume.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, like in the horizontal, because you're dealing with big markets, so that's generally horizontal type applications or waves. How do you think about luck? And like, what is luck in venture? Is there such thing, or is it? There's so many things within the scope of what we think we're good at versus what's luck. I've been reading a great book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And she talks about, we have these biases, right, that get reinforced that we think are skill, but could be luck, or, we change our strategy because, our skill selects a company that lost because of luck, not because of skill. So how do you think about luck versus skill within early stage venture?
Yeah, I think it would be hard to say that luck doesn't play a role in anything, whether it's, your own life trajectory of jobs or venture investing. Of course, you have to have an incredibly diligent investment process. And there is a role that luck plays somewhere along the way, whether it's a company talking to the right person and getting a new contract or a business development opportunity, or, luck and someone taking a chance and giving them the funding that they need, or a hiring opportunity. So there's probably a right place, right time component to everything, but you have to have a diligent investment process in order to have repeated success. I think luck will get you something, every now and then. Hopefully everyone runs into a little bit of luck, but in order to create a venture franchise that endures throughout time, you have to have more than that. You have to have a true investment process and discipline that goes with it.
That's awesome. Liz, what as we kind of wrap up today, what is your favorite book? Or what book do you give out the most, I should say?
Yeah, that's a hard question, favorite book, because of course there's business books and there's life books. My favorite book that's not a business book is Born a Crime, which is Trevor Noah's story of his life, which is incredible. I think $1 Trillion Coach, the story of Bill Campbell. It's an incredible book, regardless of what industry you're in. There's so much that you can learn from it. There's so many stories of the people that Bill Campbell had coached. There's firsthand accounts. It's written by Eric Schmidt, Jonathan Rosenberg. They have their own experience working with Bill, but they also speak to so many other executives and household names who talk about the impact that Bill had on them. And so I would recommend that book for really anyone, regardless of what your industry is. You can learn from it.
Awesome. Liz, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review. We drop an episode every Tuesday, and we're found on all your major platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And we will see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack Podcast. Make sure to share this with someone you know that can benefit from this content. Remember to support this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. David Paul is the founder and general partner at DWP Capital. All opinions expressed by David and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of DWP Capital. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. David and guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed on this podcast.